we hear quite often from Donald Trump that if he was in office, the war have not started, and he is saying that when he was in office there were no wars, and it is quite common theme from his camp. For example, I have heard this recently from Sebastian Gorka during his interview with BBC, and also current Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the same thing during the NATO conference on Wednesday. So I would like to present you the rebuttal, the fact-checking of this claim by Stefan Korshak. He wrote an excellent article. I would like to share it with you. So let's go. Let's do it. So Pete Hegseth at the outset of press conference at a NATO conference on Wednesday, during which the US Defense Secretary argued Donald Trump was and will be an effective deterrent to Russian aggression and military violence. It's worth mentioning, Hegseth considers himself a soldier who always respects the sacrifice of men and women who risk their life in combat. This is the Hegseth quote. In 2014, Vladimir Putin, invaded Crimea not during the presidency of Donald Trump. Over 4 years, there was no Russian aggression from 2016-2020. In 2022, Vladimir Putin took aggression on Ukraine. Once again, not while Donald Trump was president of the United States. Any suggestion that Donald Trump is negotiation from anything but a position of strength is on its face ahistorical and false. Hegseth went to Princeton, so it's reasonable to assume he knows that you don't get to invent history, you actually have to read it. Otherwise, you will wind up sounding stupid. He worked for Fox News for several years and called himself a journalist. As I have mentioned elsewhere, I think it is reasonable to expect a reporter or an official would not be spouting off claims that are easily proved false. During the peaceful period from 2016 to 2020 and Pax Trumpica that Hegseth was talking about. During this time, Ukrainian soldiers were killed in Ukraine on the Donbass line of contact, fighting troops fielded by Russia. About 800 to 1,000 service personnel were killed and wounded. And from myself, quite often during this time, I heard, in the news here in Ukraine that there was some kind of a shootout on this line of contact, and one or sometimes two or more of Ukrainian servicemen during this so-called peacetime, during Trump's first presidency, were either injured or killed. So it was constant occurrence during this time. Ukrainian civilians killed in Ukraine same period from military activity in Donbass were about 800 killed or wounded. So about 1,000 service personnel and 800 civilians were killed or wounded during this so-called time of peace. Syrians confirmed killed by Russian ground force combat activity in Syria over that time frame vary, but seems to be between 7,000 to 9,000 people. Syrians dead just in the Russia-run siege and bombardment of Aleppo, which Assad forces also helped prosecute, seem to number more than 30,000 people. Syrians killed by Russian airstrikes, 21,300. About half were arguably armed insurgents. And now these insurgents are running Syria. So, all in all, I think that's an awful lot of people dead and wounded because of Russian military activity that are being ignored for the sake of the claim that the first Trump administration kept Russian military aggression firmly in check. So, it is not true. For my part, I can add that in Mariupol sector during the 5 years I was there, so it's not me, it's Stefan Korshak, the author of this article. For my part, I can add that in Mariupol sector during the 5 years I was there working in the line of contact, and it turned out closer to simultaneously with Trump's first presidency. I personally came under fire at one time or another by automatic rifles, mortars, and artillery in the hands of armed men in Russian service. I'm willing to bet there was machine gun and grenade launchers in there as well. I got buzzed by drones, but in that war not by grads. Grads meaning this multiple rocket launcher systems, MLRS. I saw houses blown up, villages shelled and wounded, and dead civilians. Killed livestock, wheat fields on fire, mines, barbed wire. Not peace. Russian military aggression, anything but in check. Pete Hegseth, to reiterate, put himself forward as a soldier's soldier, respecting above all the experience and views of the men and women on the ground. At the sharp end. Somehow I doubt he includes Ukrainians and Syrians. I suspect he has different standard for them. Image attached, and so he is the image. Pete Hegseth and Ukraine Defense Ministry Ruslan Umerov failing to put smiles on their faces during a forced photo op at Rammstein. So, yeah, Fun fact. During his speech, Hegseth told the collective defense ministers that Ukraine would have to cede land to Russia because the Trump administration wants to convert the Russian invasion of Ukraine into a negotiated peace. Umerov is an ethnic Tatar from Crimea, and so in the picture was standing next to a senior US official who had just said Russian repression of Tatars and Russian ownership of Crimea was okay with America. Last century, the terms for what that was ugly American. These days, maybe the Gen Z people say it in a different way. And you know, this stereotype of the last century of ugly American, I mean, the people like Trump, Hegseth, and this guy, the vice president, they are just embodiment of this stereotype right now. So, unfortunately, it is true. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day, and till next time. Slava Ukraini!